Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing Podcast with your host, John Cass. Together, we'll take a closer look at the ins and outs of marketing through an agile lens. You'll learn from interviews with top agile thought leaders and practitioners and gain fresh new insights for your journey. Let's get ready to dive in.
Welcome to the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing with John Cass. I'm your host, John Cass, here in Boston, Massachusetts. Today, I'll be interviewing Jeff Clark, Research Director of Marketing Operations Strategies for Serious Decision Division of Forrester Research. Welcome, Jeff.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
Oh, great to have you. Now, you've worked in industry for a number of years, working in marketing operations. But of course, now you're working at Forrester and previously at Serious Decisions. How did that experience in industry impact your understanding of agile marketing?
Yeah, well, it is an interesting path that I think parallels how agile has made its way into into the marketing world. So, I worked for about 25 years running corporate marketing and marketing ops teams at software companies. And one of the interesting things was that I was always at software companies where we were using, in marketing, we were using our own technology. So, whether it was databases and programming languages, or whether it was, web content management systems, or whatever, the whole gamut, there was always this concept of applying it. And so as a marketer, I had to, whether I wanted to or not, I had to become, familiar with the development process that either the IT teams were using to develop the capabilities for us. I mean, I worked at a company where we kind of built our own, actually I worked at two companies where we built our own CRM and marketing automation tools. Which is not typical for most companies out there, but you get used to the development process. And as development, if I think back to the 2000 to 2010 timeframe, that was when agile was becoming the way that software development was happening, moving from the traditional kind of waterfall big bang project approach to more agile development. And what was interesting is, initially as an internal customer, my first reaction was, okay, you're not going to tell me when you're done. You're just going to give me little bits and pieces along the way, but I can't. But you're actually going to say, here's where we're completed with the whole project. But then as I actually, because one of the companies actually, I ran a COE, or Center of Excellence, where we had our own development resources building stuff for us. And so that's where I first got used to the concepts of agile and certainly the benefits of it. So experiencing it firsthand. And then as time has gone on within the last, 3 to 6 years, it has sort of migrated from, development, software development into, teams typically like involved in either, websites, like either a demand center or, web experience team, or the teams that run the marketing automation platform, that they kind of pick up from their development colleagues to say, well, we could use these same practices to, put content on the website, or execute on email-based campaigns, and developing nurture campaigns, and develop functionality that kind of ties the web and the marketing automation systems together. And then from there, it kind of like has been, moving its way into, more of a broader set of marketing applications. Because again, people kind of just see what are the benefits of more continuous delivery of capabilities, of getting small teams together to collaborate, to work through problems, tests. You can test web capabilities, you can test the marketing execution, the programs, you can test different campaign tactics, and that whole model of being able to do some iterative planning, figure out what you want to do, test it, see what works, scale it out, and do that in an agile way is, has become, I think something that a lot of companies are latching onto.
How has that operational experience impacted your thinking in the use of agile for teams? And specifically, I was thinking, um, as a marketer, it's always been the case that the other stakeholders in the company don't always understand what we're doing. And how is agile marketing helping to bring more transparency to those interrelationships with different stakeholders in the company?
That's a really good question. And I think that's where, you really got to think about, are you applying agile? And we often talk about there's big A or capital A agile, which is the process disciplines, that come out of Scrum and Kanban and other process methodologies. And then there's the little a agile, which is people want to just be agile. And we try to distinguish the two because I think there's sort of a false sense that it's like, well, if we could just kind of go with the flow and we just figure out how to collaborate, that we'll get, we'll get better at delivering stuff faster. But the reality is you've got to think about how you're applying these process disciplines to get the effect. So the idea is you're focused on how you're delivering value for the customer. So your internal stakeholders, and those internal stakeholders could be within marketing. Like if I'm a creative services team and I'm creating content and assets for all the various stakeholders in the company, or I'm running campaigns, so I'm on a campaign team, and my internal stakeholder ultimately is the sales organization. I've got to be delivering leads, opportunities, engagement for them. And in that process, so understanding the value you need to deliver, you also have to create visibility into how this is working for them. So the stakeholders have to be informed about what you're working on, or what's work to be done, what you're working on, and what has been done, what are the results of that work. So those, I think those principles, understanding the value of what you're delivering for your stakeholders, and then how you provide the visibility, the various agile process disciplines, help indoctrinate that into your way of doing work. And too often, I think those are a couple of things that marketers they're not thinking about on a day-to-day basis. So it really helps to inject that concept of being able to provide visibility, predictability, be data-driven yourself, and think about what is that value you're driving for your customers.
So after your background in the marketing industry, you joined Serious Decisions, and now you're also working at Forrester Research, but in the Serious Decision division for Forrester Research. How did you start to do research into agile marketing, and what's been the reaction from the marketing community about that research?
Yeah, well, it is. So Serious Decisions is we are focused on defining, understanding, defining, and then relaying to our clients best practices in marketing, sales, also in product management. So and particularly from a marketing ops perspective, what are marketing operations professionals, interested in doing? So they're interested in providing that infrastructure that makes marketing overall more effective, more efficient, be able to work faster. And so therefore we're thinking about, what technology marketers use, what sort of planning processes does marketing use? How do you do measurement and performance analysis? How do you understand what processes within marketing are working or not working, and how do we optimize for those processes? So those are all the areas that somebody in marketing operations, including in data, that's the kind of the other part of that. So those are all the foundational elements that help make marketing work more effectively. So from a process perspective, I think one of the interesting things, and I've been at Serious Decisions for 3.5 years now. And typically when we talk about process, we talked about like the lead and opportunity process. But, you know, in the last, I'd say 1.5 years, more of our clients have been coming to us and saying, well, we're, you know, yes, we were focused on how to make that process work well, but there are other things that we're running into challenges with, because as marketing has gotten more complex, you know, and as our teams have grown, we've got all these different functions. We need to figure out how to make them work, you know, more effectively as the teams, and also as the teams within the, you know, work within the greater marketing organization. You know, and the complexity with marketing is, you know, there's so many different channels, that, you know, delivery channels of marketing tactics. There's the idea of delivering different messages to different personas and different segments of the market. And if you're in a company that's got multiple types of offerings, you're generating a level of complexity that somehow you need to figure out, how do I get my teams focused, and how do I get them to be able to deliver, you know, again, value for our stakeholders without getting sidelined by all that complexity. You know, get this team, you know, find out what the problems you need teams to focus on, you know, put them on that path, give them clear direction, and then give them a process model that actually works to help them execute against that.
Well, isn't that the crux of the matter, Jeff, which is that you're working on the day-to-day, and if someone comes along with another task that interrupts that process, not only may you not finish those series of tasks that you thought you were going to work on, but also you might not have time to get the other task that's come in that's new.
Yeah.
And it's that discussion with those stakeholders to enable them to understand what those problems are, so that at the end of the process, you know, when they turn around and say, well, why didn't you finish this and this? And you come back and you say, well, it's because you asked us to do this and this. And I always thought that was the big issue. And I just wondered, have you seen that with your clients? Are they saying, you know, is that how Agile is helping them?
Well, absolutely. And that is one of the principles of, you know, lean process optimization, is to stop starting and start finishing work. So, you know, you gotta be able to make sure that the work that's going through a particular team, that you know, the person who is managing that team, whether it's a Scrum team with a Scrum Master, or somebody is working more in kind of a continuous flow Kanban method, and so whoever that team leader is, they've really got to have a focus on managing how work is moving through that, you know, that group of people, and that work does not, you know, doesn't get pile up on any particular individual or any particular work stream, and things aren't coming in and interrupting them. And so one of the beauties of, like, if you just take the Scrum process, you know, where you're working in, you know, sprints of a defined period, you know, 2, 3, 4 weeks, and you've got a Scrum Master who is basically working with the whoever's helping define the program. You know, we call it the Agile marketing owner, but it could be called a product owner or a program owner. So the Scrum Master and that program owner have got to prioritize what's the work to be done for the coming sprint, and then the sprint after that, and, you know, and then on down the line as far as they can plan it. And then when you go into the sprint, the Scrum Master sits down with the rest of the team and says, okay, here's what we're working on, you know, and we can discuss how we're actually going to execute on this, but here's what we're working on for the next 2 weeks, and here's what we're expected to be completed by the end of that 2-week period. And Scrum Master then takes the responsibility of making sure that nothing else gets in the way of that team completing that work. And that's how you make sure you get focused on predictable execution of you know, what they're being chartered to do. Plus, you know, that's how you can start to give visibility to you know, to your outside stakeholders about, here's what we're working on this sprint, here's what we plan to do, here's what's in process, here's what's done, here's what's off on the next sprint. And now we can talk about if you want to reprioritize any work, but I'm not going to interrupt the team to to address things that we haven't put in the plan.
That's right. It's having that bulwark against other things coming in. But let me ask you, what research questions have you sought to answer in your own research on agile marketing?
Well, I think since it is a it's a set of strategies, techniques that is in process of being adopted. So, I mean, depending on who surveys you go look at it, it certainly seems that roughly a third of marketing functions out there at different companies have adopted Agile in some way, shape, or form. So it's definitely gaining traction, but in early stages of adopting. So a lot of what clients are coming to us and trying to get answered is not only what how does this work? How do you operationalize it? But also, how do I figure out where to apply it? And so, because we certainly recommend that it's something that you pilot. You find out what sort of use cases, if you will, you think might be appropriate for trying Agile out. Pilot it. Make sure it's working for you within your culture, within the work styles of the rest of the marketing organization. Make sure it works and you can measure the delivering value, and then say, okay, now we're going to go on to maybe the next function and figure out how to apply it there. So we've got a kind of an assessment framework that we can go through and say, let's look at what are the kind of the conditions that you would say, yep, this is the right place to apply Agile. We're looking for places where we want kind of a high frequency of delivering, whether it's tactics, programs, content assets, et cetera. We want to have, particularly for using Scrum, you want to have a little bit of a tolerance for risk. So because you're going to want to try and test things, so you don't want to apply Scrum to your annual report, because that's not something you're going to test whether people like the way the numbers are displayed. Let's look at where you want to have rapid impact. So the fact that you can deliver things on the on a faster cadence is a good provides that's a good good application for Agile. And you also as much as there's an aspect of testing that particularly that's involved with Scrum, you do want to apply it to where the information that the teams needs to do its work is available. So they may be trying to figure out problems, but the inputs they need should be available, because you don't want to get them in the middle of the process and then they say, oh, I got a dependency on some work that some other group in marketing needs to do, and that they're not going to get to that for a couple of weeks. That just like throws a monkey wrench into the process. So you got to think about all these various variables and say, okay, here's where we'll pilot it, and then as we become successful, we'll think about the next application or applications, because then as you kind of scale it out is where you need to think about the maybe some of the unique skills you want to bring into the organization to make sure it's successful.
You've talked a little bit about scaling across the enterprise, and my next question touches on that, where I'm asking, when considering different marketing organizations, what are the best approaches to deploying Agile marketing across the enterprise? What I mean by that is there a difference between a small organization and a large organization, or for large organizations specifically? Are there issues in terms of deployment and support from executives in getting folks to use it? And is that approach, what approaches have you seen to be able to get deployment across such enterprises?
Yeah, no, it is a, it's a great question, and it's I think a challenge some companies have certainly been able to address well, but I think still, is going to be a challenge as adoption, grows. So, one of the things, principles that I think anybody who is approaching this needs to understand is that Agile is not about doing new work. It's about doing your current work better, more effectively, more efficiently, trying to drive, better satisfaction of your internal stakeholders. So it's not about, I'm going to go, put a team together and they're going to go off and do some other things that isn't part of, what our day-to-day marketing work is. So therefore you've got to figure out how it's going to work internally within the not only the team structure or the organization you've got, but also the cultural, fit for the organization. And as we've been talking, I mean, there's kind of some natural areas where it seems to work pretty well, like as I was saying earlier, kind of, web development or experienced teams, creative teams, or content marketing, but there have been organizations that have decided to deploy it more broadly. I mean, one that we actually talked about at our summit conference back in May was Siemens, and Siemens PLM Group had a digital marketing team. I think it was like 40, 50 people, and they are all working in Agile teams, so multiple teams. And some of those teams are organized in as Scrum teams running sprints. Some are organized as more of a, what I think they called a lean team, or ran kind of a Kanban process where it's just kind of a continuous flow where the team leaders are managing the work in process. And so everybody in that organization, in that group is functioning an Agile team in one way, shape, or form. And tremendous results in terms of improving the productivity and the sort of the success and acceptance of their output, their product. But that has to work. I mean, Siemens is a large organization, so that's a nice self-contained unit. It's got to work within a larger organization where they're having regular meetings with the stakeholders outside that digital marketing team, and making sure that they're doing their the processes of how they plan the work and how they deliver it, and get and make sure that it's delivering the value for the stakeholders outside that group is working. And so that's just, those are one of those things that's like, I'd say, you've got a unit within large organizations working pretty successfully. Now let's make sure that works in the overall large organization. And how can we apply some of those same concepts, if it's working there, to other units? And also, you get to the point where, if you think you're going to be doing this more broadly, and certainly there are cases where, where I know companies have done Agile more broadly, then you start to say, we need to have an Agile coach, or somebody who is actually going to, work with the individual teams and their Scrum masters and team leaders, and make sure that we've determined how the process is going to work for us. We're letting people, the various people who participate in this, to know how the process is supposed to work. We're also letting the rest of the organization. There's got to be good communication about how this works, how it might be different from the way you've received the output and the product from these teams in the past. So there's a lot of good change management skills that need to be applied as you're expanding this out.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? I think it's one thing to do it, as you'd mentioned with the Siemens team example, with one team that's cohesive and they're all working together, but it's another thing to deploy it with other teams, or even connect with other stakeholders. Have you seen any innovations in how people do that deployment? Any how has the Agile marketing function in companies developed over time in terms of deployment? Have you seen anything? You mentioned the coach. Anything else?
Yeah, well, I think one of the things is that there is, and I think other, some of the people like that, we've both been connected to, like at Agile Sherpas and others that I've heard them talk about their experiences around a broad set of companies that are adopting this. Is that there is no one tried and true way to execute Agile. And yes, there is the Scrum methodology and the various ways of running sprints and building backlogs, and yes, there's a Kanban methodology, but as we've all been talking to various clients, we realize is that what people do is they take those concepts and then they apply them to their business, their particular parts of the business, and they figure out how to make it work for them. So they'll make adjustments, and they'll make, you also got to figure out how do these Agile teams work within the context of the company's own planning processes and doing performance reviews and quarterly business reviews or marketing reviews. So that's where, you've really got to figure out how this fits in within your own organization, and every organization is different from an org chart structure, from a cultural structure. So there's really work to make sure it adapts. And again, some people use Scrum. I think the example at Siemens, originally they put everybody on Scrum teams, and then they realized, well, Scrum didn't necessarily fit every use case. So we're going to have some teams run more of a Kanban process and some teams run Scrum process. And there's certainly organizations out there that say they adopt the Scrum ban, which is kind of like the hybrid of the two. And so you can come up with all kinds of different variations on those themes. And that's fine, because it's not as much about, being 100% true to any specific discipline, but figuring out how you use those techniques to make your work better.
So we talked a little bit about the process and how different companies use some of the different processes, which I think is interesting. What about results? That's always important to marketers. How have marketing teams achieved results with Agile marketing, and how are marketing organizations measuring success?
Yeah, well, there's as we often say with these, when you're trying to measure these kind of the success of in internal functions, there's three things you'd measure. One is the efficiency. So what's kind of just like the throughput. Have we improved the throughput? And then when I went back to that Siemens example, they had like a 2.5% increase in productivity. So in terms of the actually number of projects, or in their case, user stories, they were able to develop within, any particular planning period, whether it was a month or a quarter or whatever. So that's a pretty big improvement in just the throughput. And actually another example that we've talked about a lot is a company called Veracode, and they're another. Actually, I think their whole marketing team is probably of that kind of 45, 50 person range. And they're applied to Agile across the whole marketing team, and they're getting like a 20% reduction in time to deliver, requests. So requests that come in, because I think they're more in a shared service model. So the requests that come into them, they're able to reduce the delivery time by, 22%. So that's where you can see the just improvement in efficiency. The third way you want to measure is effectiveness. So is the product that's being delivered, is that actually hitting the goals of whoever the stakeholder is? I don't have any particular stats to quote from any customers I've seen, but I know that's one of the things that when you go through the review process, you're reviewing what an Agile team has created. You want to be able to not only see did the output, is it what I expected, but when I actually deploy it, is it doing what I intended to do? And so as you see companies, they're that are like using it for, for web experience optimization. I mean, there's where teams are constantly testing to see, are we getting the kind of, conversion rates, behavioral attributes that we're seeking by changing some of the capabilities we have on our website. So that's where if you applied it to like personalization or targeting, you can start to see those, sort of short-term impacts or improvements in the effectiveness. And then the third area that you want to measure is just the stakeholder satisfaction. And I actually certainly seen some marketing operations teams do this outside of the context of Agile, but I haven't seen teams do this from an Agile perspective. But certainly, you can deliver efficiently, you can be the ultimate product is more effective, but does the stakeholder value that? And are they feeding back to you that yes, this is, both from a process perspective and from a performance perspective, I see the value and so therefore I'm liking this. And you may get it. Certainly, a lot of teams get the sort of the not the quantitative, but more of the qualitative. Yeah, there's, things are working well. I like how it's going. I know at Veracode, one of their, the sales was one of their key stakeholders, and they were getting lots of positive feedback from the sales team. I'm not sure they measured it in terms of doing like an internal NPS score on marketing, but that, those are ways that you can try to address that.
Well, I think that's one of the big values, isn't it? It's that that transparency that happens with Agile, and then the communication that happens, and as a result, people have a better understanding about what's going on, and a more understanding about how the new organization helps to succeed with results like 20%. So that's great.
Yeah.
So Agile marketers are looking to the future, and that poses a question for me. What do you think Agile marketers are adopting more quickly in terms of marketing strategies than other campaign marketer colleagues? Specifically, have you seen people use Agile, say, as a technique to address complex issues such as customer journey mapping? What examples can you think of?
Yeah, well, certainly, I see people using it and to address things like how do we do better targeting personalization within marketing, because that's an area where you can, like I was kind of alluding to that earlier, where you can make changes, you can see immediate impacts and how your audiences are behaving, and you've got the tools to be able to address that. And I think as when you mentioned customer journey mapping, I mean, to me, that is a great example of how not just on a website, but if I think about the whole customer journey from how we've initially gauged them on third-party sites to our own owned media, to now that they're customers, do we understand, are they have they continued to engage with us? Are they adopting the product? Are they becoming advocates? So there's a whole broad journey that a team or a set of teams focused on different aspects of that journey could do. I mean, could really apply the concepts of Agile to make sure you're continually seeing how do we improve the experience overall? How are we testing certain methods? How are we making sure that we're measuring engagement and looking at how we can actually improve and not just increase engagement overall, but make sure we're improving, getting quality engagement, in companies that are focused on, retention, recurring revenue. I mean, these are big challenges that a lot of companies really struggle with, as to how do I understand that whole life cycle and how we're engaging with clients. And that also becomes frankly, a cross-functional challenge to solve. So how can, a team, that's got representatives for marketing, sales, customer service, product, business units. How can they all work together to, to address those challenges? And whether they're part of, one team trying to oversee the whole journey, or whether they're part of a team that's focused on, a specific aspect. It's an excellent example of where Agile could be applied. And certainly the other thing is that we have seen clients use Agile for kind of short-term transformational challenges. And, some examples are, we need to update our definitions of personas. So let's pull the team together to go spend, 3, 4, 5 sprints working at how we update our view of the personas, and we know what the end goal is. Or we've worked with some companies on kind of a consulting basis of where they've been trying to change their campaign strategy. So how do I what's the right team to pull together, and how do I set them through, a several month, project to do that? And that's where people kind of come out of their day jobs. They work on this transformational project. When it's done, they go back to their day job. But the way they got there was, they went through a set of iterative steps, had defined deliverables, defined goal at the beginning, the defined set of deliverables at each of the sprint cycles. And then at the end, they could say they actually, completed the project, and, here's our new strategy.
I think that's so valuable, especially if you're returning to going through that process of redefining personas. Not only are you bringing in insights that you've developed over time, but also I think it gives the entire marketing team to re-educate themselves and apply things. So that's great. Yep. So Jeff, I think we're coming to a close here, but I just wanted to give you a chance to talk a little about some of the research that you've recently published and will be publishing shortly. Any titles that you can give us that the folks listening can look out for?
Sure. Well, certainly, and as I said earlier, I'm in the marketing operations strategy team, so I'm kind of personally more focused on the, how do we define and show how to operationalize Agile marketing. So I actually am about to complete, and we're about to publish a report on the day in the life of the Agile marketer. So that kind of goes through the definitions, the describing the processes, describing how the way it fits within an organization, and is going to be kind of a basis for others within Serious Decisions to say, well, okay, how do I apply Agile to, demand marketing programs, or how do I apply it to content marketing and apply it to other areas? We actually had a really great session at our last summit, which is our big annual conference, where a couple of folks from Serious Decisions talked about, what are the ways to look at Agile across the broader organization. We called it, aligned Agile. So if I think about sales, product, marketing, how would anyone in any of those teams think about how they apply Agile? And that's something that's available, out there for, anybody who's interested comes to the Serious Decisions website and is looking for that type of content. That's available. And then we also offer e-learning courses for our Serious Decisions clients. So the next thing that I'm going to be doing is kind of applying a lot of these various pieces of research to an online learning course, so that clients are interested and we give them a taste of it. They say, okay, I want either myself or my team to go a little bit deeper. We'll give them the resources to do that.
Oh, that's great. That's great. Well, thank you, Jeff. We really appreciate it. Thank you.
Sure. Thank you. And thanks for the opportunity to talk about Agile marketing.
Well, folks, thanks for joining us on the deep dive into Agile marketing with John Cass. My thanks again to Jeff, and we'll see you next time.
Thanks for joining us for another episode of the Deep Dive into Agile Marketing podcast. Be sure and subscribe to our show and leave a review to let us know what you thought of today's episode. And if you like what you heard and want to learn more, visit www.businessagility.institute.
You may know you're listening to this show along the Marketing Podcast Network, but did you know there are other great shows on MPN to help your business? Christy Heiler hosts a fantastic podcast called Own It. Christy, tell us more about the show.
Own It is all about celebrating women and non-binary advertising agency owners. We talk about buying out of the Boys Club of Advertising because less than 1% of ad agencies are owned by women.
And where can people subscribe?
You can find the podcast at untilyouownit.com. We're also on the Marketing Podcast Network at marketingpodcast.net. And of course, you can subscribe wherever you get your podcasts.
You heard her. Go subscribe. This podcast is heard along the Marketing Podcast Network. For more great marketing podcasts, visit marketingpodcasts.net.